Isn't it a nice feeling to know that when you find love, it's all soft and warm and matching, especially when you're already in love? When no one interferes, when your family loves him, when his family loves you, and life just feels perfect. That nice feeling in your stomach, right? Okay, don't answer that. You see, in 1890, England, there were two wonderful people who were never that lucky.
Chapter 1. Seaborn Season, London, 1890. Lady Filyamina had raised her brother herself after the death of their parents. At least, that was how she understood it. She loved him deeply, and over the years, love had become permission. Ernest allowed it. Not because he was weak, but because he loved her. What neither of them yet understood was that this Seaborn Season would be the last time love would be enough. Filymina's fingers were at his collar before Ernest even reached the mantel. Not fussing, fixing. The detachable collar sat high and clean against his jaw, the cravat folded with the kind of precision that made servants relax. Filymina's touch was light, affectionate. Her authority was not. "You'll wear the charcoal coat," she said. "It photographs well in lamplight." Ernest stilled, just long enough for her to feel it. "I'm going to the theatre," he said, "and you will be seen." Filyamina stepped back, satisfied, as though he were a portrait she'd hung correctly. "The boxes will be full this season. The Velvet Mile will be crawling with women who've learned to smile like promises." Ernest's mouth barely moved. "You sound as if women are insects." Filymina's smile warmed. "I sound like someone who has watched them swarm." She reached for the day's invitations, already stacked, already sorted. She read names aloud with a smooth little cruelty, like a person tasting fruit for ripeness. "Lady this, Miss that, a widow with too many diamonds and too little sense." She tapped the paper. "None of these are right." Ernest didn't move from the mantel. One hand rested against the carved edge, still and contained. Morning light caught the silver at his cravat pin. His face stayed calm, the kind of calm men learned when arguing only made the leash tighten. "And what is right?" he asked. Filyamina turned the question into a performance. A woman of standing, a woman who understands duty, a woman who won't complicate your life. Ernest's eyes shifted, quick, quiet. Filyamina caught it anyway. She always did. "You're thinking of running," she said softly. "I'm thinking of breathing." Filymina's voice gentled at once, as if she'd heard pain and couldn't resist smoothing it. "Ernest, I'm not your enemy." He didn't answer fast enough, so she crossed the room and placed her hand over his. Warm, proprietary. "I did this alone," she said. "I took the weight. I kept the house steady when there was no one else to do it." Ernest's throat tightened. "You did," he said. "And I would do it again," Filyamina continued, eyes shining with something that looked like devotion if you didn't stare too long. "So do not speak to me as though I am merely in the way." Ernest's gaze lifted to hers. Steady, masculine, controlled. "I don't want to be managed," he said, quiet enough that the sentence felt dangerous simply for existing. Filyamina blinked once, then smiled. Small, calm, certain. "Then let me be useful," she said. "Let me protect you from mistakes you will regret." A footman entered before Ernest could reply, carrying letters on a silver tray like offerings. Filyamina reached for the top one immediately, then paused. The seal was plain. The hand was familiar. Ernest's attention shifted without his permission. Filyamina noticed, of course. "Oh," she said, and her voice cooled. "Your friend." She broke the seal with one neat motion and read. Her eyes moved fast. Her mouth did not. Then she handed the letter to Ernest, as if it was something slightly dirty. Ernest read. Victor's handwriting was impatient, slanting like a man who never waited for anyone. "Marrowick. Seaborn Season is already a madhouse. Florence has decided we are to stay 2 full months as though she means to colonize the coast. We've taken rooms at a boarding house owned by a Mrs. Gwendolen, respectable enough and close enough to the sea that Florence insists the air will cure all human misery. Come when you can. Come quietly. You know how people stare." "Victor." Filymina's brows rose. "A boarding house." Ernest folded the letter once, twice. His jaw worked. "It's Victor," he said. "I know who it is." Filyamina turned away as though the topic bored her. "But I will not have you wandering into public lodging like a character in a penny dreadful." Ernest's eyes stayed on the folded paper. "It's near the sea," he said. "And full of strangers," Filyamina replied sweetly. "No." Ernest didn't move, didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "I'm going." Filyamina turned back slowly. Teacup paused mid-air. "Ernest, it's Thursday," he said. "I'll go tonight." Philomena's smile held, but her eyes sharpened. "And you'll wear what?" Ernest lifted his gaze. "A hat." Philomena's fingers tightened on porcelain. "A hat." "A coat," he added flatly. "And you will tell me," she said, "exactly when you return." Ernest's pause was small, and it cost him. "I'll return before dawn," he said. Filyamina exhaled like she'd won something. "There." Her voice softened. "See? We can be sensible." Ernest turned away before she could touch his collar again. An hour later, the Velvet Mile was already awake. It wasn't one street. It was a stretch of London where theatres crowded together like secrets, where posters were pasted over yesterday's triumphs, where lamplight turned wet cobblestones into mirrors, and where carriages lined up at dusk like a parade of entitlement. People came to the Velvet Mile to be entertained. They came for other reasons too, to be seen, to be chosen, to be forgiven for what they were in daylight. Rose slipped through the stage door with her script pressed to her ribs and someone else's criticism still ringing in her ear. A wardrobe girl hurried past, carrying a bundle of fabric that smelled like old perfume. A stagehand cursed under his breath as a painted backdrop caught on a nail. Nothing sat still here, not even disgrace. "Thursday," muttered a chorus girl, panting as if the day had chased her. "And if I must run that scene again?" "You will," Rose said, already moving, already shrugging off her cloak, "because Saturday is coming." The manager's voice cracked through the corridor like a whip. "Places." Again. Rose stepped into position. She said her line. It came out clean. Too clean. Like a door closing softly instead of slamming. "More," the manager snapped. Rose swallowed. Her throat burned from repetition and pride. "I said more, Miss Rose. Seaborn season will be packed. The boxes will be full. They'll want to feel something." Rose did not look up at the imaginary boxes. She kept her eyes where they belonged, on her mark, on her script, on the life she was trying to build out of words. A girl near the wings leaned in, too cheerful, too unafraid. "If the boxes are full, maybe one of them will take a liking." Rose didn't stop moving as she answered. "To the play, you mean?" The girl smirked. "To you." Rose's mouth curved, sharp as a pin. "If a man wanted to save me, he'd start by paying my rent." The girl's smile faltered, then returned, gentler. "You could still—" Rose cut her off with a glance, not cruel, just tired. "I'm going home tonight," Rose said. "I'm taking the weekend." The girl blinked. "During Seaborn season?" Rose gathered her things without slowing. "My daughter doesn't care about Seaborn season." There was a beat, one of those tiny pauses that carried a world of unspoken things. "Right," the girl said quietly. Rose didn't explain. She didn't soften it. She couldn't afford to. She left while the theatre was still hungry for more of her. Outside, London's air bit hard. The Velvet Mile glittered with damp light and overheard laughter. Rose moved fast because Thursday always raced towards Saturday, and because somewhere by the sea Nellie would be waiting. By the time Rose reached her aunt's boarding house, night had settled properly. Lamplight trembled in the corridor. The house was breathing, doors closing, footsteps overhead, someone laughing too loudly in a downstairs parlour. The sea wind pressed at the windows like it wanted in. Rose came through the front door with her muscles aching and her mind full of lines she hadn't delivered correctly. She shut the door behind her, quietly, because she was thinking of Nellie. Then she heard movement at the far end of the hall. A figure, tall, still, hat low, coat collar turned high enough to hide half a face. Rose didn't stop to wonder who he was. She didn't stop at all. She rounded the corner too quickly. Her shoulder struck his. Her script flew. The sound echoed down the corridor like a snapped ruler. "Watch where you're going," Rose snapped, breath short with irritation and fatigue. The stranger's head tilted. Even in the dim, his eyes caught lamplight. Blue, cold-looking, unreadable. "And you," he said, voice low, clipped, maddeningly calm, "might consider doing the same." Rose bent for her script without waiting for permission. "This is my home." A door on the ground floor opened at the same moment. Footsteps, quick, familiar. A man's voice, amused and warm, spilling into the hall like he owned comfort. "Well," Victor drawled, "this is a welcome." Rose straightened, still holding her anger like a shield. Victor stepped into view, and his expression changed. Not slowly, instantly. His gaze fixed on the stranger's half-hidden face. His mouth opened as if a word had already leapt up, then stopped. The stranger lifted one gloved hand, small, sharp, warning Victor into silence. Rose stood there with her script bent in her fist, the sea wind rattling the glass behind her, and absolutely no idea why the air had just turned dangerous. Rose's heart was still kicking from the collision, not because it hurt. She'd been hurt in far worse ways than a bruised shoulder, but because the corridor had changed. The air felt tighter, quieter in the wrong way. Victor had gone still. Ernest had lifted one gloved hand, and Victor, who looked as though he'd argue with a priest if the priest annoyed him, had obeyed. Rose's fingers tightened around her script until the paper bowed slightly at the edges. "Is this how you greet your guests now?" Victor said lightly, stepping closer as if the hall belonged to him when it suited. His smile was easy, but his eyes kept flicking, quick and careful, between Rose and Ernest. Rose tightened her grip on her script. "He ran into me." "I did not," Ernest said at once. Rose snapped her gaze to him. "You were standing in the dark like someone trying not to be seen," Victor finished for her, too smoothly. Ernest's jaw flexed at Victor's interference, but he didn't correct him. Rose caught that, the smallest surrender, and it sat wrong in her chest. Victor rubbed his hands together as though warming them by the tension. "Right, well, no one is bleeding. A success." Rose's temper flared, tired and sharp. "You find this amusing." "I find most things amusing," Victor replied, and then his smile softened. "Miss Rose, is it? Mrs. Gwendolen has spoken of you." Rose didn't like being spoken of, but she didn't show it. "Has she?" "Only good things," Victor said quickly, as if good things were fragile and needed protection. Rose kept her eyes on Ernest. "And who is he?" Victor opened his mouth, glanced at Ernest's still raised hand, quiet warning, and changed course mid-breath. "A friend," Victor said too blandly. "A rather particular friend." Rose lifted her chin. "Then tell your friend not to lurk in hallways." Ernest's eyes narrowed slightly. "I was not lurking." "You were," Rose said. "Normal people come through the front door and let their faces be seen." Victor made a small sound, half cough, half laugh, as if he were trying very hard not to react to something else entirely. Ernest took one step forward, not aggressive, controlled, but it stole the air in the space between them. Rose didn't step back. Her shoulders squared instead, like the stairs behind her had turned into a wall. "I came to see Victor," Ernest said. "Not to be inspected." Rose's laugh came out dry. "How unfortunate for you." Victor slid in between them before the air could catch fire. "Miss Rose, forgive him. He's been traveling." "I didn't ask," Rose said. Ernest's gaze flicked down, briefly, to the bent corner of her script, then back up. "You work at the theater." It wasn't a question. Rose's stomach tightened in that annoying way it always did when someone connected her to the Velvet Mile out loud. "Yes." Victor's smile returned, safer. "We've come for Seaborn season. Florence insists it's good for the lungs and the soul." Rose didn't care about Florence's soul. She cared about getting upstairs, seeing Nellie, and closing the day behind her like a door. "Well," Rose said, stepping around them, "enjoy your season." Victor drifted, just slightly, toward the stairs. One shoulder, one foot, enough to make her stop without touching her. "Miss Rose?" Rose stopped. "What?" Victor's voice went softer, careful, not quite like him. "You're tired." Rose's eyes narrowed. "Is that an apology?" "No," Victor admitted. "It's an observation." Rose's mouth twitched despite herself, which annoyed her more than the argument. "Move." Victor stepped aside at once. Ernest did not. Rose's shoulders tightened. "Are you going to stand there all night?" Ernest's voice was low, clipped. "If you keep speaking, yes." Rose stared at him, then smiled, bright, sharp, and entirely unfriendly. "Oh," she said, "you're one of those men." Victor winced. "One of which? A man who believes he can enter any space and make it his. Rose said, still smiling. Ernest's eyes held hers. And you're a woman who believes she can sharpen words into weapons. Rose tilted her head. They're the only weapons I'm allowed. Victor made a sound of surrender. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear any of this. Ernest finally moved, one precise step, to let her pass. Rose went up the stairs without another word, her boots striking each step like punctuation. Behind her, Victor exhaled, too loud in the quiet. Must you antagonize every woman you meet? Victor muttered. Ernest answered in a voice Rose could no longer hear. Good. Let him complain to someone who cared. Upstairs the corridor smelled of soap and sea-damp wool. A lamp burned low near the landing. Gwendolen always left one lit. Rose reached her door. Her fingers loosened on the handle. The day didn't fall off at once, but it finally started to slip when she stepped inside. Nellie lay curled on the bed in her nightdress. Her eyes stayed on the ceiling as if it were safer than faces. Rose crossed the room. She sat on the edge of the bed. She brushed a strand of hair back from Nellie's forehead. I'm home. Nellie blinked. Her hand lifted and caught Rose's sleeve, small and insistent. Rose held still for a beat, letting that weight settle. Was it a good day? Nellie hesitated. Rose waited. Mrs. Florence came. Rose's breath let go. Slow. Not relief exactly. Something close. And you behaved. Nellie's mouth pressed into a line. Yes. Rose kissed Nellie's hair. Good. A knock sounded at the door. Rose's spine straightened before she meant it to. Come. Gwendolen entered without waiting. Her hair was pinned neatly. Her sleeves were practical. She shut the door with care, like noise cost money. You're late, she said. Rehearsal. Gwendolen's gaze slid to Nellie. It softened for a single beat, then returned to Rose. And you're thin, she added, like a fact she didn't intend to apologize for. Rose's mouth twitched. I'm standing. Gwendolen stepped farther in, lowering her voice without turning it into a performance. You've hardly been back, she said. 3 nights, is it? And when you do come, you come like a ghost. Rose's shoulders drew up, tight at the neck. I've been working. I know. Gwendolen's tone stayed even. I only mean, she's noticed. Nellie watched them. Quiet, unblinking. Her fingers still held Rose's sleeve like a tether. Gwendolen glanced at her again, then back to Rose. She's taken up with one of the guests, she said, and the words came out as if she'd rather not give them air. A sweet woman. Too sweet, if you ask me. Been keeping her company in the day for the past 3 days now. Rose blinked. The name clicked into place too easily. Mrs. Florence? Rose said. Automatic, like she'd been hearing it all along. Gwendolen's brows lifted a fraction. So that's her name, she said dryly. Florence. Rose rubbed her thumb along the seam of Nellie's sleeve, eyes suddenly heavy. Nellie told me. I answered like I knew. For the first time, Gwendolen's mouth softened at the corners. Well, the woman means no harm. She looks at children as if she's been starved of them. Rose's hand settled on Nellie's shoulder and stayed there. And you allowed it. I allowed company, Gwendolen corrected. Not ownership. Her eyes sharpened, practical, watchful, the look she used when men tried to haggle and women tried to charm. It's only that Seaborn season makes people sentimental. It makes them careless. Rose held her gaze. Gwendolen exhaled once, controlled. Rest, she said, practical again. You can't keep living on air. Saturday will come quickly. She left. The door clicked softly. The morning came like all the other mornings at that time of year. One could know that breakfast had begun to thin. People rose, murmuring good mornings, drifting toward coats and stairs and plans. Florence touched Nellie's shoulder lightly, 2 fingers, careful. Nellie didn't flinch. Rose gathered herself to retreat, back upstairs, back to bed, back to the sleep she needed. The front door opened, not softly. A clean, firm sound that cut through the room. A spoon stopped tapping. A chair paused mid-scrape. Even the old man's whistle broke for half a beat, as if his breath had caught and then remembered itself. Victor looked up first. Florence's cup stalled just shy of her mouth. Rose didn't lift her head immediately. She was brushing crumbs from Nellie's sleeve, slow and methodical, as if order could be made out of bread. A draft slid in. Then boots. Not loud, just certain. A hat, a turned-up collar, a coat cut too well for this room, too intentional. like the man had walked in and the room was meant to adjust around him. Victor's face shifted, one flicker of something quick, then his smile returned too smoothly, like a door shut fast. "Ernest," Victor said. The man stopped in the entry. His gaze moved across the room and landed on Rose. It didn't rush. It didn't apologize yet. It simply held. Rose's hand stilled on Nellie's sleeve. Victor stepped forward at once, voice steady, placing words between them as if words could be furniture. "Miss Rose," Victor said, "this is my friend, Mr. Ernest." Ernest removed his hat. No flourish, no warmth bought for show. "Miss Rose," he said, "I came to apologize." Rose's arms folded on their own. "For last night," Ernest added. "In the hall." "You were rude," Rose said. "I was," Ernest replied immediately. No excuse, no smile to soften it, no joke to make her responsible for forgiving him. Rose blinked once, caught by the cleanness of it. "I mistook you," Ernest said, "and I spoke as though it were your fault." Rose looked at him steady. Her pride kept the wall upright. Her tiredness leaned against it. A flicker crossed her mouth, quick and unwilling, then she pressed it away like a mistake. Ernest's eyes didn't miss it. He didn't react, which was somehow worse. "If you would allow it," he said, "I'd like a brief walk." Rose didn't move. Ernest added, as if he'd thought of it only after, "Only as far as the bend. Not the beach, not the town. Not far enough to turn into a story. Just far enough to make it private." Rose glanced at Nellie. Nellie looked up at her, calm as ever, fingers still looped around Rose's hand like a quiet claim. Rose lifted her eyes back to Ernest. "I can't go far," she said. "Not today." "I wouldn't ask it," Ernest replied. A pause, a beat long enough to be a question without sounding like one. Rose exhaled once. "Fine," she said, quickly. Outside again, the wind cut clean. Ernest kept to the side, hands behind his back. Not casual, controlled. He matched her pace without ever overtaking it, like he was making a point of not taking space. "I won't keep you," he said. "I only wanted my apology said properly." "It's said," Rose answered. Ernest nodded. "Thank you." Rose's brow lifted. She didn't trust men who arranged meetings for nothing. She waited for the second purpose to reveal itself. Ernest didn't fill the silence. He simply walked beside it, letting it exist. Rose stopped at the bend. "That's far enough." Ernest stopped too, immediate, precise, like he'd been waiting for the boundary to be placed. "Of course." Rose turned back at once. "I'm going upstairs," she said. "I need sleep." Ernest's brow tightened faintly. "At this hour?" Rose looked at him, as if the question belonged to someone who had never had to ration rest. "My first night is Saturday," she said. "London is 45 minutes from here, and I won't be ruined because I didn't rest." Ernest nodded once, taking the information like a man who remembered things for later. Rose didn't tell him where she performed. She didn't offer a name of a theatre. She didn't give him a handle to grab. She went inside, hand on Nellie's shoulder, and climbed the stairs with the steady purpose of a woman keeping her life upright. "Mother!" Behind her, the boarding house returned to its ordinary sounds. The bell's echo faded. Teacups clinked again, and somewhere below, the old man began to whistle, light as morning, like he could stitch the room back together with nothing but breath. Rose had been holding herself up on thin air for most of the day, not the pretty kind of tired, not the gentle kind, the kind where your body eventually stopped negotiating. She barely made it back to her room before she sat on the bed and felt the mattress take her, heavy, immediate, like it had been waiting for her to quit standing. Nellie stood by the door, small hands folded, watching. Rose reached out and smoothed her daughter's sleeve once, then again. "You want to stay with Mrs. Florence?" Nellie nodded. Rose searched her face, eyes, mouth, the set of her shoulders. No tremble, no shrinking, no uncertainty. "Then you stay where your aunt can see you," Rose said. Nellie nodded again. "And you come for me if anything feels strange." Nellie hesitated, then whispered, "Nothing feels strange." Rose's throat tightened. She bent and kissed Nellie's hair. "Good." Downstairs, Florence took Nellie's hand like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Not pulling, not steering. Just a light hold, 2 fingers at first, waiting, until Nellie's hand settled back into hers. Rose paused on the top step for one breath. Only one, watching the way Nellie stood easy beside her. Then she turned and went back to her room. She lay down fully this time. The pillow took her cheek. Her eyes shut, and then she slept. Victor waited until Rose's door was shut and the corridor had settled into its quiet. Then the breath he'd been holding slipped out of him, slow and careful, like laughter had weight and he'd been carrying it for manners. "You are a ridiculous person," Victor said. Ernest stood in the front room with his hat still in hand, coat buttoned, collar up, not sitting, not settling, angled toward the door as if the house might try to keep him. "I apologized," Ernest said. Victor's head tilted. "You traveled 2 hours to apologize." Ernest's jaw worked once. It was the right thing. Victor stepped closer, amused. "Since when do you ride out like a knight for the right thing?" Ernest didn't answer fast enough. Victor's smile widened. "How long have we known each other?" "Too long," Ernest said. That wasn't the question. Ernest stared at him. 20 years. Victor nodded, satisfied, like he'd been waiting for the number to land. 20 years. And in those 20 years, I have never once seen you hurry anywhere unless your sister was chasing you with a list. Ernest's eyes flicked. "Don't." Victor didn't stop. "Oh, Ernest, how could you possibly do such a thing? A boarding house, a public house, with people." Ernest's mouth flattened. "That's not what she sounds like." Victor leaned in, voice sharpening in that way that made it crueler and funnier at once. "It is exactly what she sounds like." Florence appeared in the doorway then, Nellie tucked just behind her skirt, calm as ever, a book held against her chest. Florence smiled. "Are we talking about Lady Filyamina?" Victor pointed at her, bright with delight. "We are." Florence stepped into the room, openly pleased. "Go on then. Do her properly." Victor lifted his chin as if the room were a stage. "Ernest, you cannot possibly be serious. Do you know who might see you? Do you know what people say? Do you know what people think?" Ernest's eyes narrowed. "Stop!" Victor raised a hand. "I'm not finished. If I find out you have been walking about with strangers, I will simply—" He paused, letting it hang, then added, "die on the spot." Florence laughed, bright and soft. Nellie didn't laugh. She just watched, eyes steady, the book held tight to her chest, as if she were keeping the moment from moving. Ernest looked uncomfortable in a way that had nothing to do with guilt, and everything to do with having an audience. Florence tipped her head. "Your Grace is in disguise, yes?" Ernest's gaze snapped to her. "Don't call me that here." Victor's brows lifted. "Oh yes, the hat, the collar, the great mystery. No one will ever guess." Ernest shot him a look. Victor grinned. "It's fine, truly. A duke in a boarding house is perfectly normal, happens every Friday." Florence's smile softened into something more thoughtful. "Your sister would not like it." Ernest's voice went flat. "No!" Victor shrugged. "She would rather see him buried than married to a woman who doesn't come with a title." Florence's eyes sharpened. "Victor!" "What?" Victor said. "It's true." Ernest's jaw worked once. He didn't argue because there was nothing to argue with. Florence lowered her voice. "And she would be worse if she knew you walked with Miss Rose." Victor's eyes lit again. "Exactly." He turned to Ernest, pleased with himself. "So tell me, why did you come? You could have waited until you saw her again. You could have let the moment pass." Ernest didn't answer. Victor leaned in. His voice went quieter, not kinder, just more precise. "Or is it that you couldn't sit with it? That you couldn't stand leaving a mess behind and pretending it wasn't yours?" Ernest's breath left him, short. His gaze shifted away, as if there was something in the wallpaper worth studying. "I don't believe in love at first sight," he said. Florence blinked, then smiled. "Nobody asked you about love." Victor laughed. "No, but you brought it up." Ernest's mouth tightened. "She isn't—" He stopped, restarted, clipped. "She wouldn't fit." Florence's voice stayed gentle. "Fit into what?" Ernest looked at her, then at Victor, irritation flashing, at himself more than anyone. "Into my world." Victor's smile turned slow. "Ah." Ernest kept going, as if stopping would make it worse. "She's an actress." Florence's eyes widened slightly, interest catching. "An actress named Rose." The name landed on the table between them. Nellie's head lifted. She stepped forward with quiet purpose and looked up at Florence. "Beg pardon," Nellie said, polite as a little lady, voice steady. "Is my mamma here?" Victor's face went blank in the way men do when they're caught and realize they are about to be terrible liars. Florence didn't even blink. She smiled down at Nellie as if nothing unusual had been said at all. "No, love," Florence said smoothly, like Nellie had asked about the weather. "Your mamma is resting. You know she's been working very hard." Nellie watched her. Florence kept her smile gentle and easy, hands relaxed, voice unhurried. "And I was just about to read you the next page," she added, tapping the book lightly. "Come, it's the best part." Nellie hesitated one beat. Then she let Florence guide her back toward the other room, as if the question had been answered before it was asked. Victor waited until they were gone, then exhaled like he'd been pulled out of deep water. Ernest kept his eyes on the doorway a moment longer than he meant to. Victor caught it. Of course he did. "You're going to the theatre," Victor said, pitching the words into the air with false casualness. "Tomorrow." Ernest didn't look at him. "Yes?" Victor's grin came back. "I'll see you there." Ernest put his hat on. "You will." Victor followed him to the door, still unable to stop himself. "Just so we're clear, if Lady Filyamina finds out you are spending your nights in a seaside boarding house like a character from a penny serial, she will set you on fire." Ernest opened the door. "Goodbye, Victor." Victor waved him off cheerfully. "Sleep well, Your Grace." Ernest shut the door without replying. That night, Ernest lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. He shifted once, then again, as if a different angle might make his mind behave. He told himself it was simple, right thing done, apology delivered, end of it. He told himself Victor was a fool, Florence was a romantic. Neither of them could be trusted with sense. He told himself Rose was not his problem. His fingers tightened on the sheet, and his mind did what it wanted anyway. Rose's face, Rose's voice. The way she looked at him like he was just a man and not something to be handled carefully. His jaw clenched. He stared harder at the ceiling as if staring could push it away. He told himself she would not look at him that way if she knew who he was. He told himself people always changed. They curtsied, they smiled too much, they tried too hard. They became nervous or greedy, or both. And yet, Rose had looked tired and still stood her ground. Rose had smiled and then taken it back, like she didn't trust the smile either. Ernest turned onto his side. In his sister's mouth, the word commoner would taste like approval of itself. He could already hear Filyamina saying it without even looking up from her list. Ernest stared into the dark. He did not want her. That was what he told himself. He did not want trouble. He did not want whispers. He did not want Seaborn season turning his life into gossip. His throat worked once. He swallowed. And still, tomorrow sat in his chest like an impatience he hadn't earned. Saturday, opening night. As if the day held something he couldn't name. As if a play might answer a question he hadn't meant to ask. He closed his eyes. In the dark, he tried to believe he was in control. His hand stayed fisted in the sheet. He failed. Morning did not ease Ernest the way it should have. The table was laid neatly, tea steamed in thin ribbons, toast sat untouched on the rack, edges gone pale and dry. Everything was correct, so correct it felt like a trap. Lady Filyamina sat opposite him, cup poised, posture perfect. Half the paper lay folded at her elbow. She read without blinking much, and whenever the columnist grew too enthusiastic, her mouth tightened as if she could correct him with disapproval alone. Then her gaze slid, precise, unhurried, to the tickets beside her plate. She picked one up. "A King and the Pauper," she read aloud slowly, like she was deciding whether the words deserved to exist. Good heavens! Ernest's spoon made a small sound against the cup. He stilled it with 2 fingers. Filyamina studied the title again, lips pursed. Who came up with this ridiculous idea? Ernest took a sip of tea. She continued, warming to it, voice sharpening as if the play had personally offended her. A king and a pauper, as if such people belong anywhere near each other. Her eyes lifted to his face. "You look tired." "I'm fine." Filyamina ignored that the way she ignored rain. Acknowledging it would require care. "You were out late." "So were you." She waved a hand, dismissing the entire notion. "That is different." Ernest's gaze held hers. "How?" Filyamina tilted her head, patient, indulgent, like she was explaining something to a child who insisted the sky might fall. "Because I know where I'm supposed to be." Ernest didn't answer. Filyamina leaned back slightly, the newspaper settling with her, everything returning to order. "Now tell me, what do you suppose this play is trying to say?" Ernest's thumb traced the rim of his cup once, slow. That a man doesn't stop being human because of where he was born. Filyamina laughed. A short, sharp sound that ended quickly, like a door shut. Oh, Ernest, don't be absurd. She tapped the ticket with one finger. Tap, tap. There is no world where a pauper and a king are equals, and certainly none where such confusion ends well. Ernest set his cup down. The porcelain clicked against the saucer. And if it did? Filyamina smiled at him like he'd said something foolish but charming. Then it would be a fairy tale. Aren't most plays? Her smile thinned. Her cup paused halfway to her mouth. Careful. Ernest didn't look away. Do you really believe class decides what people are allowed to feel? Filyamina's eyes flashed, quick, bright, controlled. Class decides what people are allowed to do. She leaned forward, just enough to make the air between them tighter. And it knows better than to pretend otherwise. Ernest breathed out slowly through his nose. His jaw worked once. You sound very sure. I am, she said crisply. And before you start imagining nonsense, let me be clear. People like us do not rearrange our lives for stories. Ernest studied her, the set of her shoulders, the way her hands never fidgeted. Is that why you never made room for one? The room didn't move. No rustle of paper, no clink of cup. Even the fire seemed to hush, if only because Filyamina stopped breathing for a beat. Her face hardened, the softness draining out as if someone had turned a key. You are being unkind. I'm being honest. Filyamina's voice rose. Only a little, but the ceiling heard it. At my age, I know exactly what I'm doing. Ernest nodded once. Slow. Do you? She stood abruptly. The chair legs scraped, clean, sharp, and the sound felt louder than it should have. I will be very interested to see how this season ends, she said, gathering her things with neat, clipped motions. Gloves, paper, ticket returned as if it were contaminated. She turned, and her eyes pinned him the way a hat pin holds fabric. And I trust you will remember who you are. As she left the table, she muttered, just loud enough to land like a blade. My God, a king standing beside a pauper, and speaking as if it were possible. Ernest remained where he was. His hand moved to the tickets after she'd gone, not quite touching them at first, hovering, as if the paper carried heat. Then he picked them up. He stared at the title until the letters stopped looking like ink and started looking like a dare. And for the first time, he wondered who had decided where people truly... Chapter 2. The First Act. Saturday waited all day, not loudly, not impatiently. It sat there, pressing at the edges of every hour until evening finally gave in. By the time Ernest arrived at the theatre, the street was already thick with movement. Carriages slowed the moment they turned the corner. Footmen stepped down and opened doors as if this were the only place worth stopping tonight. Filyamina took his arm at once. Not because she needed him, because she liked the contact, the claim. Her fingers settled, light but definite, and she guided him forward as if the pavement had been laid for their shoes alone. They moved inside. The noise changed as soon as the doors closed behind them. Louder, warmer, voices layered over one another, laughter, anticipation, silk brushing silk. The sound of a crowd that believed something important was about to happen. Filyamina walked with purpose, scanning faces, catching glances, giving none away. Her mouth held its practiced curve. Her eyes did the counting. They reached their box. She settled in, pleased, fan in hand, chin lifted. The position fit her the way a crown fit a portrait. Ernest sat beside her and looked out over the theatre, rows of people, boxes stacked like tiers of judgment, a sea of heads and jewels and expectant mouths. The lights dimmed slowly, not all at once, just enough to quiet the room. Filyamina raised her glass. At least it's full. The curtain stirred. The narrator began. A story, a familiar one. A king, a pauper, two lives set too close together. Ernest listened. His shoulders stayed back, his hands stayed still, the posture of a man who could afford to be unmoved. Then the light shifted, and Rose stepped forward, not rushed, not announced, simply there. Ernest's fingers tightened on the edge of the armrest before he realized he'd moved at all. She wore plain clothes, nothing meant to impress, nothing meant to distract. No shine, no ornament, just her, clean in the light, as if the stage had been waiting for her feet. His breath caught on the way in. He swallowed it down. Her voice carried, clear, steady, honest. The pauper spoke, and the theatre leaned in. Ernest's gaze fixed, unwilling to blink. He didn't notice his own stillness until the act had already taken it from him. Filyamina leaned forward, glass to her eye. She watched with interest, not warmth. "She's good," she said. Ernest didn't answer. Rose moved across the stage like the space belonged to her bones. When she spoke, the room held. When she paused, no one dared to fill it. Ernest's ribs tightened around a slow breath. The king entered to applause. Handsome, confident, easy in his role. Ernest's mouth went hard. The way the king looked at Rose lasted a shade too long, too practiced, too comfortable, like the man had already decided he was allowed. Ernest's thumb pressed into the armrest. A small, useless pressure. Something sharp rose anyway. Filyamina snapped her fan shut. "Do sit properly!" Ernest adjusted at once. Not because she'd won, because it was easier than being noticed. The act carried on. The plot continued. Lines, laughter, movement, music. Ernest heard it all as if from a distance, his attention trapped where it had no business being, following Rose's mouth, Rose's hands, the precise way she held a pause as if it were a weapon. When the break came, he stood. The movement was too fast. It drew Filyamina's eyes immediately. "What are you doing?" she asked softly, already displeased. Ernest's throat worked once. "Air." Filyamina's gaze flicked across the box, taking stock of who might be watching his restlessness. "Don't wander," she murmured, pleasant enough to anyone listening. "You'll look like you don't belong." Ernest didn't answer. He was already looking past her, down toward the corridors and exits, toward the places an actress might disappear between acts. The bell for the interval rang, and the theatre loosened at once. Chairs shifted, voices rose. People stood like they'd been holding themselves still on purpose and finally had permission to breathe again. Ernest did not wait. He left the box the moment the curtain fell and moved down toward the tea room with the same quiet speed he used when he didn't want to be stopped. Filyamina barely glanced at him. "Be quick." He didn't answer. Downstairs, the tea room was already busy. Cups clinked, plates scraped. The air smelled warm and sweet, like people were trying to soften what the play had pulled out of them. Ernest found a small table near the side, close enough to see the room, far enough not to be the room. He ordered tea and sat with his hands still, as if stillness could make him look like a man who belonged anywhere. He told himself he was only here because of the interval. He told himself he was only here because people expected it. He told himself a lot of things. Then Rose walked in, not looking for him, not searching, just stepping into the tea room because she had earned 10 minutes where she did not have to stand under lights and become someone else. She slowed when she saw him. For a beat, it looked like she might turn away. Then she didn't. Not because she wanted a conversation, because pretending not to see him would make it a bigger thing than seeing him. Rose crossed the room and stopped at his table. Ernest stood too quickly, like his body didn't know what to do with her this close. "Miss Rose," he said. Rose sat without smiling. "You pick strange places to appear." "I'm sitting," he said, as if that proved something. Tea arrived, and with it, a pocket of quiet. Ernest looked at her longer than was polite. Rose noticed. She glanced once around the room, checking if others had noticed too. They had. Rose lowered her voice. "Is there something wrong?" "No," he said too fast. Then he stopped, because the next part would have been a lie. Rose waited. She was good at waiting. The kind of waiting that made people either speak plainly or choke on their own nonsense. A gentleman passed their table and paused. His gaze flicked over Rose, quick, assessing, then returned to Ernest. "Your Grace," he said, polite and automatic. The gentleman moved on as if he'd said nothing at all. But the room did. A spoon paused mid-stir. A laugh near the window thinned out and died. Rose went still. Slowly, she looked at Ernest, like she needed to be sure she had heard correctly. "Your Grace," she repeated under her breath. Ernest didn't try to wriggle out of it. "Yes," he said quietly. Rose's breath left her in a small, disbelieving sound. "You're a duke." Ernest nodded once. "Yes." Rose leaned back. Not starstruck, not impressed, just suddenly aware of how quickly a quiet conversation could become something people talked about. "And you came to a boarding house dressed like that," she said, eyeing his hat and collar, "as if you were trying to be someone else." "I was," he said. Rose's eyes narrowed. Why come there like that? He didn't dress it up. Because people behave differently when they know who I am. Rose held that, then gave a small, dry breath. I wouldn't have known, she said. I don't go about London keeping track of dukes. Her tone stayed plain, not small. I have a child. I have work. That's what I keep track of. Ernest nodded once. I understand. Rose set her cup down carefully. And I see the boxes from the stage, she said, so I know the sort of people who sit up there. Ernest didn't move. I just didn't expect one of them to be hiding down here. I know men like you sit there, she continued. Men with names. Men people watch as much as they watch the play. He didn't deny it. They sat in that truth for a beat. Then Victor arrived, like he always did, bright, easy, arriving right on top of tension, as if tension offended him. Well, Victor said, appearing at Ernest's shoulder, this looks familiar. Florence was beside him, composed and smiling, as if she had walked in and immediately understood what kind of moment this was. Victor dropped into a chair without asking. Florence followed, calm as ever. Rose's eyes flicked to Victor, dry. You left for one act. Victor grinned. And somehow he's found you again. Florence's smile warmed. Miss Rose. Rose gave her a small nod. Mrs. Florence. Florence sat with a kind of gentle confidence, like she belonged anywhere and never needed permission. Victor looked between Ernest and Rose, pleased with himself. I have to say, Victor began, I'm impressed. Ernest's eyes narrowed. Don't. Victor ignored him. You managed to sit through an entire act, leave the box, and still find trouble in under 10 minutes. Rose's voice stayed low. If your idea of trouble is tea. Victor leaned back. Tea is always trouble. It's just polite about it. Florence gave Victor a look. Behave. Victor lifted his hands. I am behaving. I'm sitting. Rose's gaze returned to Ernest for half a second, quick, cautious, then back to her cup. Victor caught the look between them. Of course he did, but this time he didn't poke at it. He leaned back instead, watching Ernest with quiet amusement, as if filing the moment away for later. Florence noticed too. She always did, but she said nothing, only reached for her cup and gave Rose a small, reassuring smile. The tea room shifted around them, people standing, voices rising as the interval thinned out. Rose set her cup down. I should go, she said, already gathering herself. I'm finished for the night. Ernest nodded. Of course. Victor started to say something light, something safe. Then laughter lifted near the entrance. High, bright, too controlled to be innocent. Victor's head turned first. Florence's hand paused on her cup. Ernest's shoulders went rigid, the way they had the first time Rose saw him in the corridor. Rose followed their gaze. Lady Filyamina stood just inside the tea room, gloves immaculate, hat angled precisely, smile practiced to perfection. She didn't scan the room like a guest. She assessed it like an owner. Her eyes landed on Victor, and the smile warmed, beautifully, like she had decided to be charming. Victor, Filyamina said, as if the name belonged to her. Of course you're here. Victor stood a fraction too fast. Lady Filyamina. She let her gaze drift to Florence and offered her a nod that looked polite until you watched the eyes. Mrs. Florence, Filyamina said. How domestic you look. Florence's smile didn't move, but her posture did, straightening, calm as stone. Lady Filyamina, Florence replied evenly. Philymina's gaze slid, unhurried, to Ernest. Her smile didn't change. Only the temperature did. Ernest, she said it softly, like a warning wrapped in affection. Ernest stood. Filyamina. And then, finally, her attention drifted to Rose. Philymina's eyes paused on her face the way they had paused on the tickets that morning. Slow. Testing. Recognition sparked, quick as a match. Oh, Filyamina said, and the sound was almost pleased. It's you. Rose didn't move. She didn't rise. She didn't offer her a curtsy. Her hand stayed near her cup, like she still had the right to sit where she was. Philymina's smile widened. She lifted her hands and gave Rose a small, delicate applause. 2 taps. 3. Soft enough to be polite. Loud enough to be heard. Brava, Filyamina said. Truly, the pauper was convincing. A few heads turned. A few eyes lingered. Rose felt it in the room without looking at anyone. Victor cleared his throat. Too late. Too useless. Florence's gaze sharpened. Ernest's voice cut in, quiet and flat. "Stop." Filyamina didn't even glance at him. She kept her eyes on Rose. "And I must say," she continued sweetly, "it's not every evening one sees a woman from the stage enjoying tea with—" Her gaze slid to Ernest's face, and she let the pause do the stabbing. "My brother." Rose's mouth tightened. "We were speaking." "Were you?" Filyamina said, pleasant as sugar. "How fascinating." Her eyes flicked, quick and precise, over Rose's dress, her hands, the simple restraint. Then back to Rose's face. "And how," Filyamina asked softly, "does a duke come to know you well enough for private conversation?" Rose didn't blink. "Ask him." Philomena's smile held, but something in her eyes brightened, like she liked resistance, because it gave her permission. Ernest stepped closer, not loud, not dramatic, just enough to put his body between Filyamina and Rose without looking as though he had. "That's enough," Ernest said. Philomena's gaze finally snapped to him. For a single beat, the smile dropped. Then it returned. "Perfect." "Is it?" she murmured. "Or are you simply afraid of what I might learn in public?" Ernest's jaw worked once. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Filyamina," he said again, lower this time. "Not here." Filyamina held his gaze. Then she turned back to Victor with sudden brightness, like she could switch masks by will alone. "Victor, darling, do you know, the theatre is positively buzzing," she said, as if nothing had happened. "One can hardly hear one's own thoughts." Victor gave a strained little laugh. "Yes, quite." Philomena's eyes returned to Rose one last time. She smiled, still polite, still lovely, and let it land like a blade wrapped in lace. "Do rest your voice, miss." She trailed off, as if she couldn't be bothered to remember the name. Rose didn't give it to her. Philomena's smile sharpened at that. Then she turned to Ernest, slipping her arm into his with proprietary ease. "We should return," she said briskly. "You're needed upstairs." Her fingers tightened, lightly, on his sleeve. A reminder. Ernest didn't move at first. His gaze flicked to Rose. Rose stood smoothly, composed. "Good night," she said. Ernest answered, quieter. "Good night." Their eyes held for half a breath. No softness, no promises, just awareness. Filyamina watched the look like a woman counting coins. Rose turned to go. Ernest followed a moment later. Not rushing, not chasing. Just leaving when she left, as if it were ordinary, as if it were nothing. They stepped out into the corridor, and the theatre swallowed them again, warm, bright, alive with little sounds. A girl in a feathered hat laughed too loudly as she passed. Two men argued about the first act as if their opinion could rewrite it. Somewhere deeper inside, a violin tested a note. Then another. Rose walked with purpose, not looking back. Ernest's eyes found her anyway. Not openly, not foolishly. Just the way they kept returning, as if she'd become the only fixed point in a moving crowd. Behind them, from the tea-room doorway, Filyamina watched, still smiling, already deciding what she would do next. The corridor carried them like a river. Warm air, perfume, the murmur of people returning to their seats. The theatre seemed to brighten and dim in waves, depending on which door opened, which laugh rose, which footman brushed past. Rose kept walking. Not toward the box stairs, not toward the tea-room again, toward the front doors, toward the night, toward air that did not belong to anyone with gloves. Behind them, Philomena's voice drifted out of the tea-room, bright, civil, sharpened at the edges. "Victor, darling, you must come back up," she said, as if the second act would collapse without her witness. "People will think we've been detained by biscuits." Victor gave a small laugh that sounded like surrender. "Heaven forbid." Florence's voice followed, soft, composed. "Come, the bell will ring." Philomena's heels clicked once, decisive, then the sound of her attention moved away, pulled upward toward velvet and chandeliers. And still, Ernest kept walking after Rose. Rose felt it, that steady presence at her back, that quiet refusal to let the moment end where his sister had cut it. She reached the front doors. A doorman opened one. Cold air slipped in like honesty. Rose stepped out. Night met her full in the face. The street was lit in patches, lamps in iron cages, pools of gold between long stretches of shadow. Carriages rolled past in slow importance, wheels whispering over stone. A gust of sea wind came in from somewhere beyond the buildings and made the theatre's warmth feel like a trick. Rose drew her shawl tighter and walked down the pavement. Not home, not yet. Just away. Footsteps followed. Quicker now. Less measured. Rose let him gain on her for 3 breaths. Then she stopped beneath a lamp and turned so suddenly his pace checked. "What now?" she asked. Ernest halted a few paces away, as if he'd measured exactly how close was permissible. "I came to apologize," he said. Rose's mouth twitched. "Again. For my sister," he added. Rose gave a short, unimpressed breath. "Oh, how fortunate for you," she said. "A family full of apologies. It must save you from actual decency." Ernest's eyes narrowed slightly. "She was rude. She applauded me," Rose said, voice low, "as if I were a trained dog who'd managed not to bite." "I heard it!" "And she enjoyed it," Rose went on. That was the worst part. Ernest's jaw worked once. He looked as if he had 100 things to say, and none of them would help. Rose's hands tightened on her shawl. "I wanted to hit her," she said, calm as a verdict. Ernest blinked. "My sister?" "Yes," Rose replied. Across the head. Not a dramatic slap, a sensible strike. Something to knock the righteousness loose. A sound almost escaped Ernest. Not laughter exactly. Something caught between disbelief and admiration. Rose pointed at him immediately. "Don't." "I didn't say anything." "You don't have to," Rose said. "Your face is doing it." Ernest's lips pressed together, attempting neutrality like a man attempting a foreign language. "I'm sorry," he said again, and this time it sounded like it cost him something. Rose looked past him, toward the theatre doors, toward the warm mouth of the building that swallowed people whole and spit them out applauding. "She thinks I'm a creature that wandered into the wrong room," Rose said, "and she wanted everyone to see it." Ernest took a step closer. Only a fraction. Careful, not claiming, not cornering. "She should not have spoken to you at all," he said. "That's the trouble," Rose replied. "Women like that always speak. They just do it politely so everyone can pretend they weren't cruel." Ernest didn't disagree. Rose let out a breath. "The kind you release when you've been holding your spine up too long." "Go back," she said, "before she decides to make it worse." Ernest didn't move. "She has already decided," he said quietly. Rose's gaze snapped back to him. "Then why are you here?" Ernest's throat worked once. Because he couldn't stand it. Because the look on Filyamina's face had been too satisfied. Because Rose had been made small in a room full of witnesses, and Ernest had done nothing but say, "Stop." He didn't say any of that. He only said, "Because you didn't deserve it." Rose stared at him. For a beat, her anger faltered. Not gone. Just tired. The wind pushed at her hair, pulled a loose strand free from her pins. Rose shoved it back with 2 impatient fingers. "I don't care what she thinks of me," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word, just slightly. Rose cleared her throat, annoyed at herself for it. "I've been judged for years," she went on quickly, as if speed could cover weakness. "A woman alone, a woman with a child, a woman with a job people like to pretend they don't watch." Ernest's gaze stayed on her face. Rose's hands began picking at the edge of her shawl. Pick, pick, as if her fingers needed work to do. "If Nellie's father were alive," Rose said, and the sentence came out like it hurt her mouth, "none of this would be like this." Ernest's posture shifted, uncertain, as if he didn't know where to place himself when the world stopped being sharp and started being real. Rose kept going anyway. "He loved her before he ever met her," she said. "He used to press his hand to my stomach and talk to her as if she could hear him. He'd tell her she was brave already. He'd tell her she'd never have to be afraid." Rose swallowed hard. "And when she was born," her voice thinned, "he looked at her like she was the only good thing that had ever happened to him." The theatre behind them released another burst of laughter, as if some line had landed on stage. It sounded far away. Rose blinked. Once, twice, too hard. "If he were here," she whispered, "he would have made it easier." Ernest didn't speak. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't say the dreadful things people say when they panic. Time heals. He's in a better place. You must be strong. He simply stayed. Rose's shoulders trembled once. Then again, like her body had given up and chosen honesty without consulting her. Rose turned her face slightly, as if she could hide the tears by not looking directly at him. "Sometimes I think," she started, then stopped, as if the thought embarrassed her. Ernest's voice came out low. "What?" Rose laughed once, small and broken. "Sometimes I think the world would be kinder if there were a man beside me. Not even love, just presence. Something for people to look at before they look at me." Her breath hitched. Something for them to fear. The words came out rawer than she meant. Rose pressed her fingers to her mouth like she could push the feeling back inside. Ernest took one step closer. Not bold, not possessive. Just close enough that if she swayed, she wouldn't sway alone. Rose's eyes slid to his collar, his hat, the shadowed line of his jaw, and grief did what grief always did. It reached for what it had lost and tried to fill the shape with anything that might hold. Rose's hand fisted in his coat. Her voice came out soft, broken, too intimate to be meant for him. "James," she whispered. Ernest went completely still. The name landed like a stone in water. Rose's face tipped up. Her eyes were wet, unfocused, searching his features as if she could drag the past back by force. "Don't go," she whispered, and it wasn't Rose speaking to a duke now. It was a woman speaking to the dead. Ernest's hands lifted, hovered, then settled at her shoulders carefully, as if he were holding something fragile he did not understand. "Rose," he said, low. "Rose, look at me." Rose blinked again. The lamplight caught the tears properly now. Her gaze sharpened, slowly, and the present rushed back in. Her grip loosened on his coat as if she'd burned her hand. Rose's mouth parted, horrified. She started. Ernest didn't move away. He didn't move closer either. He only kept his hands where they were, steady. "It's all right," he said, and his voice was rougher than before. "It's all right." Rose shook her head once, a small, violent motion. "It's not," she whispered. "It's not." Her knees softened. Ernest's arms came around her then, not squeezing, not taking, simply bracing her. Rose's forehead fell against his chest. For a moment, she stopped fighting the comfort. The wind shifted his coat, brought his warmth closer, and Rose's breath stuttered. She lifted her face, too near. Ernest's head dipped, almost without permission. The space between their mouths narrowed to nothing but air and shock. Rose's eyes flicked to his, wide, wet, confused. Ernest didn't touch her. He waited, as if waiting was the only honorable thing left. And then, hoofbeats rounded the corner. A carriage rolled past, wheels loud on stone, lantern swinging, the driver calling something sharp to his horse. The sound cut the moment clean in two. Rose jerked back as if the night itself had slapped her. Ernest's hands fell away immediately. Rose pressed her fingers to her mouth, as if checking she hadn't done something she couldn't undo. Her voice came out small, furious at itself. "That was—" She swallowed hard. "That was nothing." Ernest's jaw worked once. "No." Rose's eyes flashed. "Don't agree so fast." Ernest looked at her, steady again. "I won't insult you by pretending I didn't feel it," he said. Rose's breath caught. Then she turned sharply, pulling the shawl tighter. "The bell will ring," she said. "I have to go back." Ernest took a half-step after her. "Rose." She stopped, but didn't look back. "If you follow me again," she said, voice clipped, "do it for a better reason than apologies." Ernest didn't answer, because he didn't have one he could say without turning the night into a promise. Rose walked back toward the theatre doors, wiping her face like she had never cried at all. Ernest followed. Not beside her, not close enough to be a story, just near enough that she would know he hadn't left. Behind them, the sea wind moved through the lamplight and made everything look briefly like a dream. Then the doors opened. Warmth spilled out. The theatre swallowed them again. Rose stepped inside first. Not because she wanted to lead, because if she hesitated, someone would look at her too long. The lobby was thick with returning bodies, coats being shrugged, gloves being pulled tight, the small chaos of people pretending they hadn't been watching one another as much as they'd watched the stage. The bell chimed again, patient, insistent. Rose kept her head down and moved through it. Ernest followed. Not beside her, not close enough to be a story, just near enough that she could feel him as a pressure in the air. Rose didn't turn. If she turned, she might see his mouth. If she saw his mouth, she might remember how close it had been. And Rose could not afford to remember. Not here. Not in a building full of eyes. She found the corridor that led to the changing rooms, a narrow place, busy with stagehands and girls in feathers and men carrying props like they were prayers. The air smelled of powder and sweat and lamp oil. Rose stopped at the door marked for the women. She finally looked back. Ernest stood a few paces away, hands clasped behind him like he was trying to train himself into stillness. Rose's voice came out low. "Go back to your box." Ernest didn't move. "You're shaking." Rose glanced at her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. They were steady enough to work. "I'm fine," she said. He watched her for a beat too long. Then he nodded once, as if that was all he was allowed. "Good luck," he said quietly. Rose stared at him, almost offended by the gentleness. Then she turned sharply and went inside before she could say something stupid or soft. The door closed. Ernest stood there for a breath. Then he turned and walked back the way he came. Slow, controlled, the walk of a man returning to a seat he no longer fit. The second act began. The house darkened again, that slow dimming that made every voice lower itself. Filyamina sat in the box like a statue made of silk and certainty. Victor was beside her, trying to look at ease. Florence watched the stage, calm and quiet, but her hands were folded tighter than before. Ernest sat. He kept his posture perfect because his sister would notice if he didn't. Filyamina raised her glass. The curtain lifted, and Rose stepped into the light. For a moment, Ernest couldn't understand how she did it. How she could walk out in front of hundreds of people as if her heart had never been pressed raw on a lamplit street. Rose spoke her first line, clear, steady, and the theatre leaned in again. Ernest's fingers tightened once on the armrest, not because the scene was sad, because Rose was pretending so well, it looked like truth. On stage, the pauper laughed, a practiced laugh, bright enough to carry. But Ernest saw the smallest thing, the way she swallowed after it, the way her eyes blinked once too hard, then steadied. She moved across the stage and the crowd followed her like she held them on a string. Filyamina watched too, not with admiration, with attention. Her gaze shifted once to Ernest, then back to Rose, then to Ernest again, as if she were checking a puzzle piece against the shape of the whole. The act carried on. A line landed and the room laughed. Ernest didn't. Filymina's fan opened. Slow. She didn't look at him as she spoke. "You're distracted," she murmured. Ernest kept his eyes forward. "It's a play." Filymina's fan fluttered once. Delicate, lazy. "I know," she said. "That is why it's so simple." Ernest's jaw tightened. Rose turned on the king on stage, sharp-tongued, proud, refusing to be spoken down to. The room loved it. The applause came too quickly, too eager. Rose dipped her head and carried on. Filymina's voice came again, soft as lace. "You like her." Ernest's gaze stayed fixed on the stage. "No." Filyamina hummed, as if that answer amused her. "Then you won't mind if I ask Victor about her?" she said lightly. Ernest's eyes flicked to her at last. Filymina's smile remained perfect, pleasant, deadly. "I'm only curious," she added. "I do enjoy understanding what makes people misstep." Ernest's voice dropped. "Leave him out of it." Filymina's fan paused. Her eyes turned to him, bright with satisfaction. "So it is something," she said. Ernest didn't answer, because anything he said would become a weapon in her hand. On stage, Rose stepped closer to the king. The scene shifted. Tension, closeness, the kind of story the audience adored because it cost them nothing. Ernest felt the heat of it in his ribs anyway. Filyamina watched Rose's face, then watched Ernest watch. She didn't need more proof than that. The act ended. The curtain fell. Applause erupted, loud enough to shake the air. Filyamina clapped as well, neat little taps, smiling for the room. Rose came out for her bow. She did not look up at the box, not once, as if she refused to give them the satisfaction. Ernest stood because everyone stood. Filyamina stood because she liked to be seen standing. The theatre roared. Rose bowed. Then she disappeared behind the curtain. As the crowd began to spill into the lobby, Filyamina turned, already moving, already deciding. "Come," she said. Ernest followed because refusing in public would give her too much to use. They reached a corridor off the side, quieter, less crowded, a place where voices carried. Filyamina stopped and faced him at last. Her smile was still there. It just didn't reach her eyes anymore. "You will not go wandering again," she said softly. Ernest stopped in the corridor and turned fully to her. Not halfway, not politely, fully, as if he'd reached the end of something. "Enough," he said. Filyamina blinked, almost amused. "Ernest?" "No," Ernest replied, quiet and final. "Enough is enough." Her smile tightened. "What are you doing?" Ernest held her gaze. "I love you," he said, and the words were steady, not tender, not pleading. "As my sister." Filymina's brows lifted, faintly triumphant, as if affection proved she was right. Ernest didn't let her take it. "But this," he continued, voice low, controlled, "this has been going on for too long." Filymina's eyes flashed. "You are tired, that is all." Ernest shook his head once. "I am 32, he said. "I am not your child." Filymina's mouth thinned. "Do not be dramatic." "I am not being dramatic," Ernest said. "I am being clear." He stepped closer, just enough that she had to look up at him properly. "You raised me," he said. "You protected me. You did what you thought you had to do." Filymina's chin lifted. "I did what was necessary." Ernest nodded once. "Yes, and I am grateful." A beat. Then his tone changed, the gratitude ending cleanly, like a door shutting. "But you do not own me." Filymina's expression hardened. "I have never claimed to." "You don't need to claim it," Ernest cut in. "You simply behave as though it is true." Filymina's eyes narrowed. "You are forgetting yourself." Ernest's gaze didn't flicker. "No," he said. "You are." The words landed. Filyamina went still. Ernest's voice stayed quiet, which made it worse. "I am your brother," he said. "Not your project, not your legacy, not your possession." Filymina's smile returned, brittle. "And you will remember who you are, before you embarrass us." Ernest didn't raise his voice. "I know exactly who I am," he said, "and I will not be handled like a dangerous object you keep locked away." Filymina's eyes brightened. "Handled? How melodramatic!" Ernest ignored it. "You will not interrogate my friends," he said. "You will not direct my movements, and you will not threaten anyone because it soothes you to have an enemy." Filymina's breath sharpened. "Threaten? Ernest, honestly." A footman appeared at the far end of the corridor, hovering, waiting, clearly hers. Filyamina didn't look at him, only lifted 2 fingers. The footman moved closer at once. Ernest turned his head, not taking his eyes off Filyamina. "You," he said, calm as steel. "Stop." The footman halted, mid-step, as if he'd hit an invisible wall. Filymina's brows lifted. "You are ordering my servants now." Ernest's voice stayed even. "I am ordering a man not to be used for your games." Filymina's smile sharpened. "I am restoring order, before you embarrass yourself." Ernest took one slow breath. Then he said it, plain, unmoving. "You will not follow her." Filymina's eyes flicked, quick, calculating. Her. Ernest didn't flinch. "You heard me," he said. "You will not send anyone after Miss Rose." Filyamina tilted her head, patient. "And if I wish to speak to her?" Ernest's gaze locked on hers. "Then you will do it openly," he said. "As a woman, not as a shadow." Filymina's voice softened, almost fond. "You are protecting her." Ernest's jaw tightened, then eased. "I am protecting my own right to decide," he said. "And I am protecting a woman who has done nothing to you except exist where you can see her." Filymina's eyes flashed. "She is an actress." Ernest didn't deny it. "She is a person," he said, "and you will treat her like one." The bell rang again in the distance, late stragglers being pushed out, the theatre settling. Filyamina straightened. Her smile returned to public perfection, but it was thinner now, more careful. "We will speak in the morning," she said briskly. "At breakfast." Ernest held her gaze. "We will speak in the morning," he agreed, "and you will leave her alone until then." Filymina's fingers tightened once inside her gloves. Then she turned to the footman, voice bright, a little too bright. "You may go," she said, as if she'd decided it herself. "Back upstairs." The footman hesitated, not looking at her, looking at Ernest. Ernest nodded once. The footman left at once. Filyamina watched him go, then looked back at Ernest with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You have become very firm," she murmured. Ernest's voice stayed quiet. "I have always been firm," he said. "You simply preferred me silent." For a moment, something sharp moved through her expression, then vanished. Polish returned. Control returned, rearranged, not lost. She turned on her heel, gloves immaculate, chin lifted, but careful now, because she had learned where the line was. London smelled of coal smoke and damp stone, even when the sky pretended to be kind. Rose let herself into the building quietly, as if the stairwell might be listening. 3 flights up, 1 narrow landing, a door with a lock that always caught for half a second before it gave in. Her uncle's rooms. Not grand, not shabby either. The kind of place that said someone had once had a little money, and then decided it was easier not to show it. A rug worn at the edges, a dark fireplace she didn't light unless she had to, a single vase on the mantel that never held flowers because she refused to waste coins on something that died on purpose. No Nellie's footsteps tonight, no small sigh from the bed, just quiet, and the awful freedom of it. Rose shut the door and stood there too long, staring at nothing, because the moment she moved, she would remember. A lamplit corridor, a man's coat beneath her fingers, her own voice, soft, wrong. "James!" The name came back like a slap. Rose pressed her palm to her mouth, hard, as if she could force the sound back down her throat. She had not meant to. That was what made it worse. Grief didn't ask. Grief reached. And tonight it had reached for the nearest thing that felt steady, a duke, of all things. Rose crossed to the mantel and touched the edge of a folded note Gwendolen had left, practical as a bill. "Your uncle is away 6 months. You will stay in his rooms for the season. Stop paying rent twice just to prove you can suffer." Rose exhaled through her nose. She hated needing help. She hated it most when she knew she needed it. Then she whispered to the quiet, like a warning. "It isn't him." Her voice shook anyway. "It can't be him." The next day, Rose woke with heat under her skin. Not the pleasant warmth of a blanket, the wrong sort, heavy, uninvited, settling into her bones as if it meant to stay. She sat up anyway, because she always sat up, because if she did not, life did not wait for her to recover. She washed her face in cold water until her cheeks stung. She pinned her hair with fingers that felt clumsy. She swallowed a mouthful of tea that tasted like nothing. Then she told herself, sternly, that she was well enough. By the time she reached the theatre, London had already begun its daily shouting. Wheels on stone, calls from hawkers, 1,000 lives moving past her as if she were invisible. Rose kept her head down and walked faster. Inside, the rehearsal room smelled of dust and lamp oil and old velvet. The company was already there. The king, handsome, careless, pleased with himself, leaned against a chair as if chairs were made for him. "Miss Rose," he said, smiling too easily, "you look as though you've been up all night thinking of me." Rose did not even blink. "I never think of you," she said. A few of them laughed. The king lifted a hand to his heart in mock injury. Cruel. Rose opened her script. The paper swam for half a second. She tightened her grip until it stopped. They began. Lines, marks, movement. Rose did it all by memory, by muscle, by sheer refusal. But the heat kept rising. A slow tide. By the second run, her throat felt raw. By the third, sweat dampened the back of her neck beneath her pins. The stage manager called, "Again." Rose turned, and the room tilted. Only slightly, just enough that the floor felt less certain than it should. She caught the edge of a table. Nobody noticed at first. Then the king's voice cut in, lower than his jokes. Rose. Not Miss Rose, just Rose. She hated him for noticing. "I'm fine," she said at once. The stage manager looked up, sharp-eyed now. "You're not." Rose straightened, forcing her spine to behave. "I can work," she said. "You can faint," the stage manager replied, "and I cannot have a pauper fainting in my rehearsal room." Laughter tried to rise. It died quickly when Rose swayed again. Small, unmistakable. The stage manager's tone turned brisk. "Go home," he said. "We'll put Clara in tonight. I'll not have the audience watching you collapse." Rose's jaw clenched so hard it ached. "My part will still be yours when you're not fevered," he snapped. Then, softer, because even he was not heartless. "Go." Rose didn't argue again. Arguing took strength, and she had suddenly run out. She gathered her shawl, her script, her pride, then walked out before anyone could try to help her. Help always felt like humiliation, until the day you needed it. Her uncle's rooms were colder than she remembered, not because the fire was out, because the place was empty. Empty rooms had a way of feeling like they were judging you. Rose shut the door and slid the bolt across. Slow, careful. Then she leaned her forehead against the wood for one long breath. The heat behind her eyes pulsed. Her limbs felt too heavy. Her dress clung to her, as if even cloth wanted to be a burden. Rose crossed to the table and sat down hard. Ink, paper, a pen that belonged to her uncle and made her hand look smaller. She stared at it, then forced herself to write anyway. Because Nellie could not catch what Rose carried, because Nellie was the only part of Rose's life that had to stay untouched. Aunt Gwen, I have taken ill, a fever. I cannot come down, and I cannot risk bringing it near Nellie. Please keep her with you and Mrs. Florence until I send word I am well. Tell Nellie only that I am working in town. I will write again as soon as I am able. Rose. Her name wavered at the end, the letters slightly uneven. She hated that. She folded the letter with fingers that didn't want to obey and rang for a messenger. When the door shut again, the silence rushed back in. Rose stood, then sat, then stood again, as if movement might shake the fever loose. It did not. She made it as far as the bed. She lay down fully this time, and her body surrendered, not gracefully, not gently. The sort of surrender that felt like losing a fight you'd been pretending you weren't in. The room blurred at the edges. The ceiling became too bright, then too dark. Rose turned her face into the pillow and tried to be angry. Anger was familiar. Anger was easier than fear. But fear slid in anyway, quiet and cold beneath the heat. Because Nellie was not here, because Rose was alone, because if she grew worse, there would be no small hand tugging her sleeve, no soft voice saying, "Mama!" Her throat tightened. A name drifted up from somewhere old and bruised, not wanted, not invited. James. Rose's lips parted on the pillow. The word barely came out. Just breath and grief and fever. Then the world tipped again, and sleep dragged her under like the sea. Rose woke the next morning with the fever still sitting on her like weight. Just stubborn heat and aching limbs and a head that felt too full. She dragged herself to the little table anyway. She dipped the pen. The ink bled where her hand shook. Aunt Gwen, I have taken ill, a fever. Keep Nellie with you and Mrs. Florence. Do not bring her near me until I send again. I cannot risk it. Rose. She folded the letter, sealed it, then sat there, breathing through the heat. How would it reach Seaborn? She had no footman, no carriage, no strength to go down the stairs and hunt for help. She only had the knowledge that theatre people always appeared when you least wanted to be seen. She set the letter on the table, within reach. Then she lay down again. Not long after, a knock came. A knock came, then another. Rose forced herself up and opened the door. Anne was there. Rose didn't ask how she knew. The theatre always knew. Anne took one look at Rose's face and stopped smiling. "Oh," she said quietly, "so it's true." Rose turned and went back to the table without ceremony. She pushed the sealed letter toward her. "Aunt Gwendolen," Rose said. "Seaborn, today." Anne picked it up at once. "I'll send it straight," she said. Rose's breath eased, just slightly. Anne's eyes stayed on her, sharp with practical concern. "They were all expecting you," she added. "You left so suddenly, half of them thought you'd run off in a temper." Rose managed a rough little sound. "Tempting." Anne snorted once, then sobered again. "They've put Clara in for now," she said. "She's steady. She won't ruin you, but she's not you." Rose closed her eyes for a beat. Anne's voice softened, not kind, just honest. "It's only a fever," she said, "but you must get well quickly. The season won't wait for anyone, not even a pauper." Rose swallowed. Anne moved the letter toward her basket. "I'll come again," she said briskly. "If you're foolish enough to try to die in these rooms, I'll be offended." Rose's lips twitched, barely. "Go," she managed. Anne lifted her chin. "Rest!" Then she was gone, and the letter with her, and Rose lay back down, knowing at least one thing was handled. Ernest did not return to the theatre the next night, nor the night after that. 2 evenings, gone. The box sat empty. People noticed. They always noticed when a duke broke a habit, not because they cared for the man, because they cared for the pattern. Whispers slid through the lobby and along the pavement outside, quiet, pleased, hungry. A duke's absence was entertainment. On the third night, Ernest came, alone, hat low, coat plain, collar turned up, as much against eyes as against the winter air. He moved through the theatre like a man who did not wish to be greeted. He took his seat. He looked only at the stage. The lights dimmed. The curtain stirred. The story began again. The pauper stepped into the light, and it was not Rose. Another girl, competent, pretty enough, careful with every mark, every breath, as if she feared the air itself. The audience accepted her without difficulty. They laughed when they were meant to. They leaned in when the play asked them to. Ernest sat very still. He waited, as if Rose might appear in the next heartbeat and prove this a mistake. She did not. The king entered, handsome, easy, too pleased with his own charm. He took the girl's hand with a flourish and held it a moment too long. Women in the stalls sighed. Ernest's fingers tightened once on the armrest, not because of the actor, because something was wrong. Rose did not vanish from a stage without consequence. He forced himself to remain until the interval. He heard the lines, but they did not land. His mind kept returning to one thought, steady, unwanted. Where is she? When the interval bell rang, the theatre loosened. Ernest stood at once, not for the tea room, not for conversation, only to leave before someone decided to greet him, or worse, to ask why his attention seemed fixed on one actress who was not there. Outside, the night air hit his face, cold, clean, useless. He could not go to the stage manager. He saw it too plainly. A duke inquiring after an actress. Why is your grace asking? How does your grace know her? How often has your grace watched her? The questions would grow teeth, and Rose would pay for them. He could not send a servant. A liveried man asking after Miss Rose would turn her name into talk by morning. He stood by the curb, jaw clenched, and tried to do what he always did. Control it. Then he admitted the truth he did not like. There was only one place he could go without turning her into gossip. The house where she lodged. The boarding house by the sea, where she returned each night, where her aunt kept respectability like law. If Rose was ill, or in trouble, or simply gone, that house would know. Ernest hailed a hired cab, not his carriage. Nothing crested, nothing that announced him. He went home and did not sleep properly. In the morning he dressed without ceremony, a plain dark coat, a low hat, a collar turned up against wind and against eyes, no footman, no signet shown, no name offered where it did not belong. He took a hired carriage out of London before the day was fully awake. By the time the air began to taste of salt, his decision had settled into something hard, not romance, not impulse, necessity. The boarding house looked ordinary. That was always the danger of ordinary places. They hid everything. Ernest knocked. The door opened, and Gwendolen stood there. Pinned hair, practical sleeves, a face that held calm authority, softened only by fatigue. "Yes," she said, not unkind, not welcoming either. Ernest inclined his head. "I must speak with you," he said quietly. Gwendolen did not step aside. "About what?" "Miss Rose," Ernest said. She was not at the theatre. Gwendolen's mouth tightened, just slightly. "She is ill," she said. A beat. Then, because she had no patience for games, "And I have her letter." Ernest's chest went hard. "How long?" 2 days, Gwendolen replied. "Fever." He nodded once, not pleading, only controlled, and very pale beneath it. "I need to know where she is," he said, "so I may be certain she is not alone." Gwendolen studied him another long beat. "Before I give you anything," she said calmly, "you will tell me who you are, and why you think you have the right." Ernest did not bluff. He did not sweeten it. "My name is Ernest," he said. "Duke of Marrowick." Gwendolen did not curtsy. She did not look impressed. She only looked tired, as if dukes were simply another kind of trouble. She said. "That explains the feeling you bring into a room." Ernest's voice stayed low. "I am not here to harm her." Gwendolen's eyes sharpened. "If you harm her," she said, "you will find I am not easily frightened by titles." Ernest nodded once. "Then listen carefully," Gwendolen continued. You will go plainly, quietly, and you will not be seen parading into her building like a story." "Yes," he said at once. "No carriage with a crest," she added. "No footman. No questions asked where they can be repeated. You have my word." Gwendolen watched him, weighing him. Then she stepped back, reached for paper, and wrote an address. She folded it, pressed it into his hand. "Her uncle's rooms," she said. "He is abroad. She is there." Ernest closed his fingers around the paper. "Thank you," he said. Gwendolen's voice stayed calm, but it did not soften. "Be a gentleman," she said, "and if she tells you to go, you go." Ernest inclined his head. Then he turned and left, still plain, still quiet, already planning how to enter a London building without being remembered, because Rose was ill, and because being seen was sometimes its own kind of ruin. Ernest did not linger outside the boarding house. He took the address from Gwendolen's hand, tucked it inside his coat, and walked away as if he had simply come for air, as if his heart was not doing something inconvenient beneath his ribs. It was still day, not evening yet, not the merciful hour when shadows forgave a man his movements. Daylight meant faces, daylight meant eyes that remembered, daylight meant questions, and still, he went. He found a hired carriage, plain, unmarked, the sort of thing that did not invite conversation. "London," he said. The driver blinked, because it was a long way to say so casually. But Ernest's coin was good, and good coin silenced curiosity better than manners ever could. The road carried him back through hedges and open fields, the sea air fading behind him until the world became stone and smoke again. By the time London rose around him, the day had turned late, light still in the sky, but thinner, less confident. The streets were busy enough to be useful. Too many people to notice one man. He kept his hat low, kept his collar up. Not because he wished to play at being someone else, because he wished to be seen as no one at all. The carriage stopped a street away from the address. Not directly before it. Directly before it would mean memory. Ernest paid and walked the last stretch on foot. He counted doorways the way a man counted exits. He reached the building and did not hesitate. Hesitation drew eyes. Inside, the entry smelled of coal dust and damp wool. A porter sat behind a small desk, half asleep, half listening. Ernest placed a coin on the wood, quietly, without flourish. "I'm here on a family errand," he said, voice low. "For Miss Rose." The porter's eyes flicked up, assessing, then down to the coin, then away again, as if he had decided he had seen nothing at all. "Second floor," he muttered. "Left." Ernest nodded once and moved before the man could think to ask more. The stairwell was narrow. Footsteps echoed too easily in places like this. Ernest kept his pace steady, not rushing, not lingering. He reached the second floor. He found the door. And there, for the first time since the theatre, he stopped, because he could hear something. Not conversation, not laughter, just a faint sound, a small movement, like someone shifting in a bed. Alive. He lifted his hand and knocked, quietly, once. Then again, because the first might have been a dream. Silence. Then a soft scrape, a slow shuffle. The bolt slid back. The door opened only a hand's breadth. Rose's face appeared in the gap, pale, hair loose in a way that did not suit her, eyes unfocused, as if the world had become too far away. She stared at him, not seeing him properly at first. Then her brows pulled together. Suspicion, even in fever, even half asleep. "Who?" she began, and the word broke into a breath. Ernest kept his voice gentle. "Miss Rose," he said. "It is me." Her eyes narrowed, trying to shape him, trying to decide whether she was imagining him. "Your Grace," she whispered, as if the title tasted strange in her mouth. Ernest's jaw tightened. "Do not say that," he murmured. "Not here." Rose blinked slowly, as if the instruction amused her, as if she had no strength left for his rules. "And why?" she said softly, voice rough with illness. "Are you at my door in daylight?" Because the truth was dangerous, because the truth was simple, because he could not bear not knowing. Ernest held her gaze. "I came," he said quietly, "because you were not at the theatre, and I could not ask after you without turning you into talk." Rose's eyes stayed on his. A beat. Then her hand slipped from the door edge. Weak. The door swung wider than she meant it to. Rose swayed, Just slightly. Ernest moved at once, not touching her yet, only close enough to catch her if she fell. Rose's lashes fluttered. "Don't," she said, as if she could still command the world. Ernest's voice stayed low. "Then let me stand here," he said, "and tell me you are well enough to shut the door again." Rose made a small sound, half laugh, half sigh, in daylight, in a narrow corridor, with her pride unravelling and his restraint thinning. She looked up at him and whispered, very faintly, "I am not well," and that, more than anything, was what made him step closer. Rose swayed in the doorway, pale and stubborn, as if pride alone might keep her upright. Ernest steadied her by the elbow, careful, as though even touch ought to mind its manners. Her eyes narrowed at him. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she rasped. Ernest's throat moved. In his head, the thought came swift and sharp. She is alone. She is ill. If she were mine, she would not be alone. And the next thought followed, cold with sense. I cannot stay the night. Not here. Not with her name already balanced on other people's tongues. One whisper. One pair of eyes. And she is ruined. Ernest's jaw clenched. He hated that the world worked that way. He hated that she would pay the price for it, and he would not. Rose blinked slowly, watching him as if he were a puzzle she did not have the strength to solve. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured. "I know," Ernest said. "And yet—" Rose's mouth twitched, faint. "Here you are." He glanced down the corridor, then back at her, and the feeling climbed higher, urgent and unreasonable. Leaving her like this felt like cruelty. Staying felt like ruin. His restraint slipped. He heard himself speak before he could stop it. "Marry me." Rose went very still. The corridor seemed to stop breathing. Then, to Ernest's horror, Rose let out a weak, startled laugh that turned into a cough. She pressed her fist to her mouth, eyes watering. "Good heavens," she whispered when she could breathe again. "You truly are unwell." Ernest's face heated. He swallowed. "I did not mean, not like this. You are fevered and I am—" Rose looked up at him, eyes bright with illness and amusement. "You are what?" Ernest's mouth tightened. "Stupid," he admitted. Rose's laugh came again, small, rasping, but real. "And here I thought you were all solemn shoulders and rules," she said. "You are more silly than I expected, your Ernest." He flinched at the title she nearly used, then at the name she did. Rose's smile flickered, pleased with herself. Ernest exhaled, half relief, half frustration. "I cannot stay," he said quietly, forcing sense back into his voice. "Not at night. Not here." Rose's expression softened, just a fraction, then sharpened again because she did not know how to be helpless without resenting it. "So you propose marriage instead?" she murmured. Ernest gave a short, helpless breath that might have been a laugh. "It appears so." Rose tipped her head back against the frame, eyes fluttering. "If you do it again," she whispered, "I may begin to think you mean it." Ernest held her gaze. A beat. Then he said very carefully, "When you are well, I will speak properly." Rose's eyes narrowed. "That sounds like a threat." "It is a promise," he said. Rose made a faint sound, not quite laughter, not quite anything else. "And now," she murmured, "you must go, before you do something even more ridiculous." Ernest hesitated, hating himself for it. Rose lifted her chin with what little strength she had left. "Go on," she said, "before I start accepting proposals from strangers in my night rail." Ernest's mouth twitched. "Yes," he said quietly, "that would be inconvenient for us both." He stepped back, because staying would ruin her, and leaving would ruin him. Rose watched him as if trying to fix his face into memory. Then her eyes drifted, heavy. Ernest lowered his voice. "Rest," he murmured. Rose's lips moved, barely. "Don't be silly," she whispered. And Ernest, who had not felt silly in years, left the corridor with the strangest ache in his chest, already certain he would not sleep at all. For the next several days, Ernest came in daylight, always plain, always careful, always as if he had no business being remembered. He did not bring a carriage with arms. He did not bring a servant in livery. He arrived like a man who had learned very quickly that a woman could be ruined by someone else's notice. Rose pretended she did not expect him. Ernest pretended the same. Neither of them fooled anyone, least of all themselves. He brought a physician on the second day, not a grand man with a great name, not someone who would speak of it at dinner. A quiet fellow Ernest introduced as a family acquaintance, a gentleman who asked no unnecessary questions and offered no unnecessary opinions. Rose tried to sit up and glare at them both. "You've brought company," she rasped. Ernest's mouth tightened. "You would prefer I brought a marching band." Rose made a weak sound that was almost laughter. The physician examined her briskly, murmured fever, spoke of rest, broth, fresh air, and patience, then left as quietly as he arrived. Rose watched Ernest from the pillow as if he were a particularly irritating dream. "You can't keep doing this," she whispered. "I can," Ernest said evenly. "I simply should not." Rose's eyes narrowed. "That is the same sort of nonsense you proposed with." He looked away, then back. "We will not speak of that," he said. Rose's mouth twitched. "Afraid I might accept." His gaze held hers. "Afraid you might," he said. And then, because he was not a fool, he added, "In a moment, you cannot afford." That silenced her, not because she agreed, because she understood. So they made an arrangement that sounded sensible, an arrangement that felt like a lie. "No attachment," Rose said one afternoon, voice steadier as the fever began to loosen. Ernest nodded at once. "None. No promises. None." "Then you may be a friend," Rose said, as if the word tasted strange. Ernest's mouth tightened. "Friends." Rose lifted her brows faintly. "You look unhappy." "I do not like the word," he said. Rose's smile flickered. "Then be grateful I didn't call you a visitor." Filyamina noticed the pattern by the third day, not because she followed him, because she knew him. Ernest leaving at the same hour, returning with the same restraint, too quiet for accident, too controlled to be innocent. On the fourth morning she met him in the corridor, gloves immaculate, expression mild enough to fool strangers. "Out again," she murmured. Ernest did not slow. "Yes." Filyamina stepped into his path anyway. "You are wearing plain cloth," she said sweetly. "How industrious." Ernest's eyes went flat. "Move." Philymina's smile sharpened. "You forget yourself." Ernest stopped, not like a boy being scolded, like a man deciding the scolding was finished. "I have not forgotten myself," he said quietly. "I have endured you." Filyamina blinked once. Ernest's voice stayed even, but the edge was unmistakable. "You are my sister," he said, "not my keeper, not my mother, not my master." Philymina's chin lifted. "I am the only one who—" "No," Ernest cut in. "Enough." Silence gathered. A servant hovered at the far end of the corridor, waiting for her signal. Ernest looked at Filyamina without raising his voice. "If you set anyone to following any woman for my sake," he said, "you will answer to me." Philymina's eyes flashed. "And when this ends badly—" Ernest leaned in just enough that only she heard. "Then you may tell yourself you warned me," he said, "but you will not control me." He stepped around her and left her standing very still, smiling for the house, seething for herself. By the end of the week, the fever broke. Rose woke one morning drenched with sweat, breathing properly again, as if her body had finally decided to return to her. When Ernest came that day, she opened the door herself. Hair pinned, face pale but awake, eyes sharp again. "You look disappointed," she said. Ernest's gaze moved over her like a man checking she was real. "I look relieved," he answered. Rose scoffed softly. "Relief is suspicious." "And yet," Ernest murmured, "here it is." She studied him for a long beat. Then, because she could not resist, because she was herself again. "You may go now," she said briskly, "before you grow sentimental." Ernest's mouth tightened. "I do not grow sentimental," he said. Rose's eyes sparkled. "That is precisely what a sentimental man would say." 2 nights later, Rose returned to the stage. The theatre welcomed her back like nothing had happened, because a theatre always pretends the show is the only truth. Ernest sat in the box again. Alone, Rose felt him before she saw him, like a tension warming the air. The king on stage, handsome and smug, took her hand a moment too long. He smiled down at her, as if the world were his. Rose heard a small sound above, the faintest shift of impatience. When she glanced up, Ernest was sitting very still, but his jaw had tightened. Rose nearly missed her next line. Nearly. After the act, The king leaned close backstage and said, pleased with himself, "You were missed." Rose's reply came too quickly. "I was ill." "And now you are not," he said lightly. Rose felt, more than saw, Ernest's presence again, waiting somewhere beyond the curtain like a question. Rose lifted her chin. She was not anyone's possession, not his, not the theatre's, not the past's, and yet her pulse betrayed her anyway, because she wanted to see him, and because wanting was beginning to feel dangerous. That evening, the boarding house held an indoor tea gathering, not grand, respectable, warm lamps, plates of little cakes, voices lowered into manners, the sort of gathering that existed to prove everyone was decent. Rose sat with Nellie near her, Victor talking too much, Florence smiling too gently, Gwendolen surveying the room like a general. Ernest sat opposite, too composed, too watchful, his gaze sliding to Rose and back, as if he could not help it. The room was full, and yet Rose felt crowded, the heat from the lamps, too much. The chatter, too much. The sensation of being looked at, even when no one admitted they were looking. She stood quietly and slipped outside without asking anyone's leave. The night was cold, sea air cut clean. Rose hugged herself, staring toward the dark lane, letting the quiet settle her thoughts back into order. Then she heard footsteps behind her, measured, controlled. Ernest. He stopped a polite distance away. "You've escaped," he murmured. Rose didn't turn. "It's not escape. It's air. A beat." Then he stepped closer. Rose felt it before she saw it. His shadow, his presence, his restraint, thinning. "You're cold," he said. "I've been colder," Rose replied. Ernest made a quiet sound of displeasure, then removed his coat and draped it around her shoulders. Rose stiffened at the touch, at the intimacy, at the ridiculous tenderness of it. "I didn't ask." "I know," Ernest said, and his voice was unusually honest. "I couldn't bear it." Rose went still, because that was not flirtation. That was confession. She turned then, slowly, eyes narrowing as if she meant to fight him. "You're doing it again," she whispered. "Doing what?" "Making it feel like something." Ernest held her gaze. "It is something," he said quietly, "and I am tired of pretending it isn't." Rose's breath caught, angry at herself for it. "This is foolish," she murmured. Ernest nodded once. "Yes. And dangerous." "Yes. And you don't even know me." His gaze didn't waver. "I know enough," he said. "I know what it felt like to leave you ill and alone. I know what it feels like to see you walk into a room and make it yours without permission." Rose swallowed. Ernest's voice lowered. "I know," he said, "that I have not wanted anything in years. Not truly. Until you." Rose's eyes shone for a second, and she looked away as if light were painful. "You shouldn't say that to me," she whispered. "I should not," Ernest agreed. A pause. Then, softer, almost awkward, as if he hated asking anything of anyone. "May I hold you?" he asked, for a moment. Rose's throat moved. She stared at him like he had offered her the moon. "You can't just—" "I know," he cut in gently. "Say no." Rose's pride fought. Then her exhaustion won. She nodded once, small, sharp, as if offended by her own weakness. Ernest stepped in and put his arms around her. Not crushing, not claiming, simply holding, steady, warm, as if he were lending her his strength without asking her to pay for it. Rose's hands hovered, then rested against his coat, fingers curling as if they belonged there. For one quiet second, she let herself be held. And for one quiet second, it felt like the world was not watching. Then a voice cut through the dark like a blade wrapped in lace. "How touching!" Rose froze. Ernest's arms tightened instinctively, then loosened, controlled again. Lady Filyamina stood at the edge of the light spilling from the window, gloves immaculate, hat perfectly angled, smile sweet enough to rot teeth. She looked at Rose as if Rose were a smudge on the season. She looked at Ernest as if he were a child caught stealing. Rose pulled back at once, face flushing, anger rising to cover the softness. Ernest turned fully toward his sister. "Go inside," he said quietly. Not to Filyamina, to Rose. Rose hesitated, eyes flashing. Philyamena's smile sharpened. "Yes, do go, before you catch the habit of forgetting your place." Rose's fingers curled into Ernest's coat for half a heartbeat, then released. She stepped away, chin lifted. "Good night," she said, to no one in particular, and she walked back into the house without looking at either of them. Filyamina watched her go with satisfied interest. Then she turned her gaze back to Ernest. "What are you doing?" she asked softly, as if she were genuinely curious, as if her eyes had not just seen everything. Ernest's voice stayed low. "What are you doing here?" Filymina's smile did not shift. "I am preventing disgrace," she murmured. "Something you have always been astonishingly poor at." Ernest's jaw clenched. He looked toward the door Rose had gone through, as if something in him had snapped into place. Then he faced his sister again. "I'm going to marry her," he said. Filyamina blinked. Not because she had not expected trouble, because she had not expected certainty. "You cannot," she said at once, too smooth, too quick, as if the words had been practiced for years. "You can't marry her. She's already a mother, and you're a duke." Ernest's eyes went flat, dangerously calm. "That changes nothing for me." Filymina's mouth tightened. "You will regret this," she whispered. Ernest didn't even look at her as he stepped past. "I have endured you for years," he said quietly. "This will not be the first time." And he went back into the house, leaving her standing in the cold with her control slipping through her gloves. Inside, the tea gathering continued. Too warm, too polite, too full of people pretending not to notice anything. Rose stood near Nellie, fingers still slightly unsteady, as if she could feel Ernest's arms on her skin. Nellie looked up at her. "Cold," Nellie whispered. Rose forced her voice steady. "Only a little." Victor was mid-sentence, telling a story no one needed. Florence was smiling too carefully. Gwendolen watched Rose like a hawk watches a storm. Then the room shifted. Not loudly, in a human way. Ernest entered, without his coat. That alone was enough. He stopped just inside the room, as if he meant to be seen. The old man's whistle faltered. A cup paused halfway to a mouth. Victor's smile froze. Florence's eyes widened. Rose's heart gave one hard, confused thud. Ernest looked at Gwendolen first, not asking permission, acknowledging authority. Then he looked at Rose, and when he spoke, his voice carried, low and steady, the sort of sound that made a room obey. "Miss Rose," he said. Rose did not move. "May I have a word?" he continued, "before I am interrupted again." A nervous laugh fluttered somewhere, small, uncertain. Ernest didn't smile. Rose's mouth tightened. "You're causing a scene." "I know," he said. "I am done avoiding them." He took one step forward, then another, not rushing, not begging, simply choosing. He stopped before her, looked down at Nellie, and his expression softened in the only way it ever did. Nellie looked up at him, calm as ever. Ernest returned his gaze to Rose. "I am going to ask you something," he said quietly. Rose's eyes flashed. "Here." "Yes," he said, "here," because he wanted everyone to hear it, because he wanted to make it impossible to twist into a whisper. "I ask for your hand," Ernest said, clear as a bell. The room went utterly still. Rose's breath left her. Victor made a strangled sound like laughter had tried to escape and failed. Florence pressed a hand to her mouth. Gwendolen did not move at all, not even blinking. Rose stared at him as if he had gone mad. "You can't," Ernest cut in, gentle but immovable. "I can," he said, "and I will." Rose's voice dropped to a hiss. "You don't even know me." Ernest's gaze held. "I know enough," he said again, "and I intend to know the rest, properly." A murmur rose, shocked, delighted, appalled. Then Ernest looked down at Nellie, and the room held its breath all over again. "And I ask," he added, "for Nellie to be mine as well, in every way a child deserves." Someone made a startled sound, half gasp, half laugh, because it was so bold, so impossible, so strange to hear, said aloud. Nellie blinked. Then, in the quiet, she asked in her small voice, "Will my mama be happy?" Rose's throat tightened painfully. Ernest crouched slightly, just enough to meet Nellie's eyes. "I would spend my life trying," he said simply. The room, against its will, softened. Even the harshest faces had to swallow something. Rose's eyes shone, and she hated herself for it, because this was exactly what she had promised herself she would never want. A life, a roof that did not shake with fear, a future that did not depend on her being perfect. Rose's voice came out rough. "You can't ask this of me in front of everyone." Ernest's answer was quiet and devastatingly honest. "I am asking," he said, "because everyone will try to stop me tomorrow." A beat. Then, from the doorway, the temperature dropped. Filymina's voice, sweet as poison, "And I will begin at once." Rose turned, heart hammering, Nellie's hand clutched in hers. Ernest straightened, turning toward his sister like a man ready to end a war, and the tea room, warm and crowded and full of witnesses, held its breath because the season had finally stopped whispering and begun to speak.
I wasn't looking, not for anything, just getting through one day at a time. Then you came softly, like a steady light, and I forgot how heavy my heart had been. I don't trust easily, you'll learn that soon, but you make safe feel like something true.
I'm frightened of hope, I admit it.
So am I, so am I.
Yet when you're near, I can breathe again.
Let me stay, let me stand.
Please marry me, please marry me.
Not for the world, not for the crowd, just for the love that found us gently when we both swore we wouldn't allow. Please marry me, please marry me. Make me the happiest man I can be. You'll never know how you saved my heart, so darling, please marry me.
Hold my hand and don't let go.
Stay with me,
Slow, slow, slow. I've won my silence,
like it suited me.
I've lived inside.
What I ought to do. Then you looked at me like I was only a man, and something in me finally moved.
I won't promise easy,
I won't pretend,
but I can promise I'll choose you.
again. If you're afraid, I won't hurry you.
Don't hurry me,
I'll learn each step.
I'll be patient too.
Stay steady, stay. Please marry me, please marry me. Not for a name, not for a vow, just for the peace that lives between us when you lean in and the world turns down. Please marry me, please marry me. Make me the man I always meant to be. You'll never know how you saved my heart, so darling, please marry me.
Hold my hand and don't let go.
Stay with me,
Slow, slow, slow,
slow,
slow, slow.
I've learned to carry what I cannot say, to smile politely and swallow the ache. But you don't ask me to be smaller. You look at me and I don't break.
And when the night comes, when I doubt again,
You make the world feel kind, and then I don't need grand, I don't need loud.
oh no,
I need your steadiness, close and true.
I'm here, I'm here.
Say it again, so I believe it.
I choose you.
I do. Please marry me, please marry me. Not for the world, not for the crowd, just for the love that found us gently when we both swore we wouldn't allow. Please marry me, please marry me. Make me the happiest man I can be. You'll never know how you saved my heart, so darling, please marry me.
never planned
to want this,
to want a hand,
that won't let go.
but here you are, and here I am.
And suddenly I don't feel alone.
Let them whisper,
Let them wonder,
they don't get to me.
ain't what we found.
If love is rare,
Then let it be ours, quiet and sure, safe and sound. We can move slowly, we can be wise, we can be careful and still be true. If you say yes, I'll spend my life being worthy of you. Please marry me, please marry me. Not for the past, not for the pain, but for the life we never saw coming, and the warmth you bring when you say my name. Please marry me, please marry me. Make me the happiest man I can be. You'll never know how you saved my heart, so darling, please marry me.